My name is Sean Renault, and I am the head interviewer.
I'm Harrison Pinkoski. I am the backup interviewer.
I'm Sam Bertelka. I'm the question maker.
And Vince Lahutsky is the video recorder. We are here interviewing Bob Wanek on November 22nd, 2017 at his home in Greendale, Wisconsin.
What is the first memory that you have as a child?
Wow. Probably I was born and raised on 45th in Oklahoma. And I guess memory would be probably the first snowstorm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
No.
No?
Too long
Too
ago.
long ago? All right. Well, who all grew up in your household? Do you have any siblings?
Brother was 4 years younger than me. My dad was an office manager for Prudential Insurance, and my mother was a homemaker. So
What did your father do for Prudential Insurance?
he was an office manager on 6th in Wisconsin.
So where did you go to grade school then, if you grew up?
Well, I went to grade school in Manitoba School, which was on 49th in Manitoba. Then they built a new school in Jackson Park, and we moved over to Jackson Park. And it got overcrowded, so in the 8th grade they moved us to Pulaski High School for 1 year, and I ended up graduating from Pulaski.
At Pulaski, is that where you developed your love for basketball, or?
Yeah, actually what happened was I was out for basketball as a freshman, and around December I got blood poisoning in my leg from athlete's foot. The disease went up my leg all the way to my groin. I was flat on my back for 2 weeks. And we came back to school in January, and the coach said, well, you can't play for a week or so. He said, you want to be a manager? And I said, what does a manager do? And he said, he throws out the basketballs before practice, picks them up after practice, keeps track of them, don't lose them, and you make score. I said, how do you do score? He said, you'll learn. And from that day on, I was scoring. I found it was easier than playing basketball.
Yeah. Was basketball always your first choice sport, or
Probably.
Probably.
Because from basketball, I became the equipment manager for the school. So I had a lot of equipment and kept track of it. Football, track, baseball, softball, things like that. So I was involved in all the sports.
All the sports. But basketball was always your favorite?
Yep.
Yep. So do you want to take us back? Were you ever disappointed that, you got athlete's foot and was unable to play? Do you feel like that was a missed opportunity, or?
No, the problem there was solved when I was on vacation the following year. The doctor told me to go on the beach down at any beach in Milwaukee and walk through the sand. He says the sand will heal it up and you won't have any problems ever. And I never had any more problems with athlete's foot. But I did partake in basketball. I went up to university. Well, I went to UWM for a year and a half, but chemistry and I did not agree, and so they bounced me out after the first year and a half. And I went and worked places around Milwaukee, and then I finished up in Madison. When I was at UWM, I went out for basketball. And when I went to Wisconsin, I was the athletic director at the dormitory and played basketball and touch football, bowled, swam, and our dormitory took the dorm civilian championship up there. So we felt pretty good about that.
Going back to your high school coach, did you have a good connection with him?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yes.
We had a good team. We took city championships, and last year I was there. So.
That's cool.
Yep.
So now going into college, you referenced that you went to UWM, and the chemistry didn't really feel right.
The highlight of my chemistry career was when my lab partner set his hair on fire.
How did that happen?
He was bending over and got to the Bunsen burner. Otherwise, I never understood chemistry.
Do you know why? Why did you try to major in it then?
I just majored in generalities, and it turned out I graduated a mathematics major up at Madison. I had no job offered to me except one, and I was a salesman of office equipment. So that's the way life treats you once in a while.
So do you feel as though you were blessed to have moved to Madison for college rather than UWM? Or?
No, I mean, they were fair about it. I mean, I didn't have the grades, so they bounced me out for a semester. And you come back and you just do what you can. And I said, the number of times you get knocked down, you got to turn around and make them better.
So what initially got you interested in sports back in?
That's just playing basketball and being involved with sports, yeah.
Did you ever have, besides basketball, did you play any other sports when you were a
Just
child?
just at Madison in the intramurals and that type of thing.
So what initially got you, what was your first job out of college using your
I
mathematics?
was a salesman for office equipment for Remington Rand. They had an office on 624 North Broadway.
What did you do there? What did your job?
Salesman. Salesman.
What exactly did you sell?
I mean, just desks, chairs, file cabinets, stuff like that. I did that for 9 years.
Did you enjoy doing that?
Basically, yeah, overall. I mean, I got my first plane flight out of them and got to see, territory covered the state of Wisconsin, a lot of driving. The problem with it was that the more you made, the more restricted your territory. So when I ended up, and anytime I was outside of Milwaukee County, I got mileage. But then the following year, they started retracting. And so finally, I was just working in banks and savings and loans in Milwaukee County. And I got tired of getting in and out of the car in the snow. So I looked for other jobs.
What was your job after that then?
Then I became a budget analyst for Milwaukee County. And in that job, I was assigned certain departments and had to handle their operating budget every year and monitor it.
Which departments did you monitor during that time?
Mainly the parks and the zoo and some of the departments in the courthouse.
Was there anyone in that job who really influenced you in some way, or?
No, I mean, it was interesting being in politics, and we had different offices, and I got out of the office to see these different departments and the parks, so I was active, let's put it that way.
Right. So what initially got you the job with the Bucks, being the scorekeeper?
I worked at those days. You had city conference and you had Catholic conference, and I was a scorer timer for basketball and football in both conferences. So when the Bucks came to town, they were looking for experienced workers. So they took 10 of us originally, and we had 10 games, preseason games, and they assigned an official from the NBA with us. And after work, we'd hop in a car and go to Racine, Kenosha, Madison, Oshkosh, Fond du Lac, Green Bay, and places like that for preseason games. As we worked them, the official would criticize us or come up with recommendations. And when it was all over, they went to the Bucks management and they said, well, what are we going to do? And they said, well, we'd like these 8 guys to work. And then they called me in and said, would you like to take charge of the crew? I said, yeah, but if I'm going to be in charge of the crew, then I want to have possibilities of hiring and firing as we go along, and allow you guys the same thing, because I mean, if a guy gets out of whack, you don't want him. We had formed the Wisconsin Scorers and Timers Association at that time because we found some of the guys that were working those games for basketball and football came in inebriated, and nobody was there to tell them they couldn't work anymore. So we felt that we had to have an association to set the rules and set the parameters so we could get people who were well qualified. So after they gave me that responsibility, they said, okay, you're going to be in charge, but you're going to be the scorer. And I got 7 other fellows with me at different statistics.
Were you the founder of the association?
No, well, at one time I was an officer, yeah. I was treasurer, I was secretary, yeah.
So going back to your reference to the Catholic Conference, could you elaborate a little bit more on that? Exactly what was the Catholic Conference and the City Conference? And
Marquette was one of them, and Pius.
Pius was so high school
Yeah,
conferences?
mainly all Catholic high schools, yeah.
Right, and you scored football, basketball, and
Ran the clock for the football.
football. Which do you like to score more, football, basketball, or?
I think football, because it starts earlier and gives me something to do, get into the scheme of things and see the kids. I like watching the kids play football and getting to know different people. Really, the coaches are really nice, and that's worthwhile. I like basketball because it's been my blood for so many years, and you just get so many things that you get involved with in basketball. So yeah, no, it's different. I played for a church team until I was in my early 30s, and I get an annual checkup. And I said to the doc, how long can I play? He said, tell you what, you can play as long as you want, but once you quit, don't go back. He said, otherwise you're going to ruin your health. So I played till I was 35, and then gave it up, because then I started working for the Bucks. And the time available wasn't there.
Right. Were you a good football player at that time, or?
What?
Did you play? Was that football or basketball that you played until you were?
Just
30?
basketball.
Basketball.
I did at Madison. I played football.
When you initially started with the Bucks, did you have a lot of faith in the team? Did you feel as though they were about to?
No, I guess what people don't understand was that in those days we were a family. I mean, there's nothing to have like Lenny Chappell. Every player had a second job. Dick Cunningham, Greg Smith were greeters at Kmart, and John McLaughlin was in sales, and he lived not too far from here. So I mean, it was not unusual for us to get together and react with one another. And what happened in those days was Larry Costello was coach, and what we did was one fellow would keep track of rebounds, one would take care of shots and assists, another one would take care of fouls and what have you, all over statistics. And after the game, we'd all get together and get a mastery. In those days, there's a sample of the sheet over there, and combine all the statistics. And it's a Mimeo sheet, and we'd have copies made, and it was my responsibility to give it to every player. And I got to know them that way. It was my responsibility. I had to call New York exactly after we got done with that and report to them all the statistics. And also mail one copy of the statistics to every team in the league. So that got to be a long day.
How long were those days? How long were those days?
About 2 hours.
So did you developed a pretty good relationship with those early Bucks players?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. We were basically like a family. In fact, Christmas time, the coaches used to take us out for a big Christmas party. So I mean, and with McLaughlin living here and a few others, Dick Cunningham and so forth. I mean, it's not like today. That was family. Today it's business.
Do you feel as though the NBA has changed for the worse then, if it's not about as much about family as it was back when you started? Or?
Yeah, in fact, I get to see the players because I have to get starting lineups 3 times to make sure it's the same one. So I get to see the players, but the other fellows I work with, that never happens. That's the sad part. But then again, maybe that's the way the world works these days.
So would you say John McLaughlin was probably the best friend that you made out of the experience back in the 70s?
Yeah, John scored the first basket for the Bucks in their entire career. And he's proud of it. Because when I talked to him the other night, he says, keep in mind, I made the first basket. I said, yeah, I know, John.
Could you describe for me, the atmosphere of the very first game that they had at the Mecca with, all the guys there?
Well, we've always felt that the first game, or any games at Mecca, were better than the ones at the Bradley Center, because the Bradley Center was not built for basketball. It was built for hockey. And the atmosphere was totally different. And it was a lot more together. The noise there was unbelievable compared to the Bradley Center.
So the Mecca, you would say, is a little bit more, closer, a little bit better, a lot better than the Bradley Center?
Yeah.
Yes. Could you maybe describe when you think the NBA shifted from being more of a family?
It was gradual. Even in those early days, the limited amount of officials, they only had 2 officials, and the number of times you saw the same official was highly more highly than it is now. Now you see an official, may not see him for another month or so. But in those days, the coach, in fact, Larry Costello asked me to keep track of officials on the wins and losses, and he wanted a sheet before every game to see how to treat the officials.
Do you feel as though the Bucks brought a certain atmosphere to the city when they came in the late 70s?
Oh yeah,
or-
I'm sure they did.
Sure they did. Was it positive or?
Well, yeah, oh yeah.
That's good.
They'd struggled the first couple of years, but then they got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and things changed considerably after that.
In those early years, did you feel as though they would become as good as they ended up being in the 71-72 season?
Well, they became more successful more quickly than anybody thought. And it was interesting, but we always enjoyed it, and there were many games that were very memorable.
Which game do you think would be most memorable of those early years?
Well, the one I think is most memorable was a stormy January night, and the Minneapolis Lakers came in. They had a 31-game winning streak or 32-game winning streak, and it was snowing pretty bad. But the rule was in the NBA, if the officials are in town, you got to play the game. So I drove down in a snowstorm, I parked in the underground near the 7th and Wells or something like that, and walked over. And on the way over, I had to figure out a way to get something so I could walk back because it was that cold. And I figured out I'd get a couple of towels and wrap them around my face or something like that. But anyway, we got there. In fact, it was so bad, the Lakers had a hotel across from the arena. They took a bus to get to the arena. And the Bucks beat them that night to break their winning streak. And 8,000 people showed up, which is highly unusual in that kind of weather. So I wrapped my head and walked back to get the car, and I was on the freeway coming home, and there was no cars out there. All of a sudden I see a car coming up, pulls alongside. It was a deputy sheriff. He said, "Could you keep it down under 25 because it's pretty bad out here?" So I slowed down to 25. I probably was going 30, 35, but that game was very memorable because it defeated a team that had many stars on it, and it was in unusual conditions. So that one kind of rings a bell.
And what year was that?
I'm thinking in 71, the year they won the championship, yeah.
Who do you think had the biggest impact of the Bucks in the early years? Would you say it was Kareem, or do you think it was more of a team captain like John? Or?
Well, I think over time, I mean, in each era, a different person was instrumental in getting people to come. And you'd have to take each segment and say, oh, Oscar Robertson here, so-and-so. In fact, I think Oscar Robertson was probably the best player they ever had.
But in that first year, who do you think brought the biggest crowd?
I think we probably got 8,000 at the most, or 9, something like that. It was never. I'm not sure whether we had any sellouts or not, because the record wasn't that great.
Do you feel as though when they drafted Kareem in the draft, it made a lot of people pay more attention to the Bucks that year, or?
Oh yeah, I'm sure it did. Yeah.
Do you think he had the biggest impact on the team more than any other player, or?
I think Oscar did. I mean, Oscar was a tough man in the locker room, and if players didn't play up to their caliber, he let them know. He helped Kareem Abdul-Jabbar get associated with the fans because he was very self-centered, and he helped them with his publicity. And on the court, he was just unbelievable. And to this day, he's still in good shape.
Do you think he enjoyed, Oscar, do you think he enjoyed being a part of the Milwaukee Bucks?
Oh, yes.
Coming from the
Yeah, he was like an assistant coach, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy.
Did you and him develop a very good relationship?
Yeah, it was pretty fair. I came into town about a year or two ago, and we talked for a while. Yeah, he's always been very nice. And
what about your relationship with Kareem? Did that ever really develop?
well, Kareem didn't have a big relationship with anybody, but he got to know me because I handed out the sheets to him at the end of every game. And we have a nodding acquaintance. He was here, 6 months ago or something like that, and we talked down the hallway one day. And so he's very approachable, let's put it that way. He didn't charge me.
No.
He gets $50,000 to come to town.
How did you feel when Kareem decided to leave the Bucks? After
I felt a little sad, but the world goes round, and Milwaukee had to do what they had to do, and he had to go where he went. And as I say, these days it's the same thing. It's a big business. And same with baseball. I mean, all the sports, football. You may think you got a good team, and you may get a good year, and then all of a sudden it's just dispersed because they feel they want the money or they want something else.
Do you feel like the team was betrayed in any way when he left? Or did you think he was more in a right to leave for the Lakers?
Oh, I think there was a unanimous decision between the two of them. He might have felt that he was doing too much and he couldn't push anymore, and they might have felt that his value had decreased, so that they just made the trade.
So during their winning season, what was it like to experience, a team that was considered one of the best in history? What was it like to experience the championship?
Well, we were hurt from the championship because it wasn't the last game here. The last game here was in Baltimore, and that kind of takes the steam away from it. So the celebration was kind of secondary, but we all felt good about it. Yeah.
Yeah. After they ended up winning 20 games in a row that season,
Yeah.
the NBA record at the time, I believe. Did you feel as though they might win the championship after those 20 games?
Yeah, we all had a feeling that they had a chance at least, and in most cases they were beating teams pretty easy. So that if everybody played up to what they could do, they could do it.
So what was it like to win the championship in 1971? Did you feel as though you played an integral part for the team, or?
It's hard to explain because every game is a different game, but I feel the same. I mean, when I sit down before and after, I can talk to people and say hi, whatever. Yeah. But once I sit down, it's the officials and me, and that's it. You can scream and holler, I don't hear you. And every game starts out 0, every game ends with a score. But my job is so detailed that I have to be centered just on scoring timing and making sure everything. These days, I have a television screen in front of me, which is hooked up to the computers, and lists what the play was before, so I can double check that they're right. The reason we have the scorebook is because electronics, you can't trust it. And the scorebook is always official. So I got to make sure the computer is with the scorebook, and we're in the same. I've got one fellow hooked up with the computer people, and if something's wrong, we holler and we get it screened and we get it straightened out before. The television part of it goes to 132 nations immediately. So we got to make sure that's all corrected as soon as possible. So sometimes it gets kind of hectic, but I don't get too much into the hyper of the thing. I want to make sure that I got the right guy scoring, the right guy rebounding, that type of thing. And you can't do too much else other than just stay focused. So, whether I get high or low, I lost that a long time ago.
Did you feel as though there was any other team that really could challenge the Bucks besides the Baltimore Bullets?
Oh yeah, there were. Those things did happen, but it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Let's put it that way.
What do you think would be the craziest statistical game that you were a part of during your time with the Bucks?
Craziest statistical one? Well, I guess there are some each year. And as you do it as long as I did, you put the last year behind you. This year, as it turns out, for some reason or other, they switched computer programs. And from the first game we had trouble with the program. And it turned out that some teams were so bad they never even got the statistic on the computer for the game. Turns out that the computer program was wrong. And so this year we started out and every game was wrong. We keep a total amount of minutes that the player plays. The minutes never total out right. And it took them 10 games to straighten that out. That makes for a long 10 games. Because we have another person doing it manually. So we got to take those figures. Somebody went in at 240 at the first quarter. We have to make sure the computer said that when he went in 240. So sometimes we stayed around for another hour or so before we got it straightened out. And other years, it was different things that came up with statistics. But basically, that's what happens year after year. Something else comes up. And we wish they'd gone back to the old system. In fact, the new system was so unfavorable. The new team up in Oshkosh, the Herd, that league voted not to go into the new system. They stuck with the old system because it was true and tried. So those things don't make life easy. I get gray hairs from that because I'm responsible.
Yeah. So through the 50 years that you've been with the Bucks, besides the Bucks themselves, was there a team, a very impressive team that you saw? Probably the best team that you saw.
Well, we used to hate to play Chicago, but then again, that's a natural rivalry. I would say the Lakers, and some others had very good teams as the years went by, but a lot of them didn't last very long. Let's put it that way. They kind of went up and down, like the Bucks are doing now. So it's hard to pick out somebody like that.
Hard to pick out. Do you have a player that you like to watch more than anyone else, or?
Not really. I mean, I have to say John McLaughlin because he's a good friend of mine, but if I don't, he'd get upset. No, I mean, I'd like to look basically I know what Milwaukee players can do on a court and where they're at and when they shoot, how, so forth. So I look for the star player from a visiting team. And, you know, every year different players come in, and some come in twice, some come in once. So you try and watch them during the game to see what they do as to why they're that good. And, I mean, I just normally focused on the Milwaukee players, so I just, like I said, they kind of go into the clouds.
Was it tough to watch the Bucks after they started going on a decline? Like you kind of said, every team goes up and down. Is it hard to watch the Bucks when you know they're not the greatest team in the association?
Kind of. I mean, it's not real deep. It's above board. I mean, I feel sorry for them when they're not playing well because I know they can do better. But I usually try and guess before the season starts as to what the record's going to be, and I just kind of like to see it end that way.
Who do you think has the most today from the players back who played in the 70s? Who do you think has the biggest influence on the Bucks and their team today from those older teams?
Wow, quite a few of them. I mean, Michael Redd, anybody down that area. I remember most of them so early because we were so close. And this day, when it's a business, you don't want to get too close to them because you feel if they leave, then you don't feel that bad. Andrew Bogut is an example. I knew him fairly well because one of my other jobs was I did timing and scoring for IndyCar racing for 15 years. So I went to Australia for 12 times, and he came from Australia. So when he came, first week he was here, I met him at the training center. We talked about Australia, and he liked that. And I've always liked him. And he's with Golden State or somebody like that. And those are the kind of players that I get close to and feel they did well. He played his heart out here in Milwaukee.
Who was the hardest to see leave through the years?
I wouldn't want to guess. No, I mean, it just, there were so many, and like I said, they've kind of fade into the clouds all the time, and I just concentrate on what's in front of me, what's new, and where they're going from here.
Do you think that mindset that you developed kind of came with, the NBA fading away from being more of a family to being more of a business?
Probably, yeah.
Do you do any other stats for Milwaukee sports teams besides you said the high school teams and the Bucks? Of course, also the IndyCar racing. But do you do anything else around the Milwaukee?
Now?
Now, back then.
Oh, no, I mean, I still do Marquette women, Marquette men basketball, and I do a tournament off at Concordia on Christmas time. Last year I did 104 ball games. Keeps the blood circulating.
So could you tell us a little bit more about what you did for the IndyCar racing and going to Australia? Like that?
I was probably 20 years I ran a scoreboard out of State Fair Park. And my uncle was Bob Wilkie, who owned race cars. He won the 559 with Roger Ward, and in 62 with Bobby Unser. And he died at 75, which kind of hurt, but his son took over. So I was involved with running the scoreboard, and the people who were in charge of timing and scoring noticed what I did and invited me to join them to be timing and scoring with them all over the world. So I was in Australia 12 times, and Rio de Janeiro, and England, and France, and I saw the good and bad of the entire world. And I can advise you places you don't want to go, but I went to places that I never would have gotten to without them. And I also held the black flag board, which meant I was at the start-finish line for the whole race. And if you want some excitement, you watch a race car go by 5 feet from you.
Which country would you say was probably the best country that you visited during your travels?
Australia. I mean, it's hard to explain, but we were down there. First time down there, you came to a corner. If there was a policeman there and you wanted to cross the street, he'd hold up the traffic and you walked across the street. They had a program whereby they would have car stops at night, and if they felt you registered wrong on their meter for alcohol, they not only took your car away, but you went to jail for 2 years, just like that. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And the people were so nice. And I mean, my wife took a trip one day, and she forgot to meet the bus at noon. And when she got there, the bus had left, and she didn't know where she was at. And she got on a bus, one of the buses, local buses, and she told the driver, and he said, "Okay," drove her right to the hotel. And I mean, over the years, I can't describe the feeling to go 12 to 14 hours in an airplane, get off, and we were at Surfer's Paradise, walk down to the beach and see this beach go 5 miles that way, 5 miles this way, and the surf rolling in, and it's 80 degrees. You can't beat that. And we were down there one year in December, early December. They were getting ready for Christmas. It was 95 degrees because it's reversed from up here. I said, those are the kind of things that live forever. And we were never treated badly down there at all. The worst place, Rio de Janeiro.
What made Rio the worst place? What made Rio the worst place that you were?
Well, Rio de Janeiro, definitely. They had, in the morning, you come out, we were guarded by soldiers. The local police meant nothing. And we were guarded by soldiers. We came out in the morning for our bus to get to the racetrack. There were rats as big as cats walking around picking up food and so forth. And the drivers had a meeting one night in our hotel, and they left, made a mistake of stopping for a red light, and they got robbed and beaten when they stopped for a stoplight. I mean, it was just that kind of a city. And to see the debris and to see how they lived like animals, it was, you don't want to go there. If you went out at all, you always went with at least 2, normally 3 people if you went to a restaurant or something like that. I mean, it's hard to explain.
While you were scoring for IndyCar racing, did you ever drive one of the Indy cars yourself?
No. I did drive State Fair Park Mile. You used to have a deal whereby when it rained and they wanted a track ride, they let the people who worked get in their cars and go around. And I found out you could hold a pedal at 60 and not be in trouble on that track.
Did you enjoy doing that a lot?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I was born in '33, and in '39 my dad took me out to a midget race at State Fair Park in the Coliseum. They had indoor racing, And once I saw I was 6 years old, it was in my blood, and anytime there was a race within miles, I'd be there.
So would you say basketball came first, but then IndyCar racing would come second, or?
Probably. I mean, I knew that I could play the basketball and do that sort of thing, and there were times after I built the house here in '59, I had a hoop on the garage, and I'd shoot 100 free throws a night just to keep in shape. And that sort of thing. I knew I couldn't drive a race car because I didn't have the money and I didn't have the connections, even though my uncle owned them, but he wouldn't put me in a race car.
Were you always interested in cars? Did you ever?
No. No. Of course, I mean, up in Portland one night, or one day they had a race, cars were coming on this way. And I always counted the cars as they went by for the starting flag because I want to make sure they all went by before I did anything. I looked up and the last two cars got together, aiming right for me. I hit the ground and a concrete block in front of me moved in 2 feet. They ricocheted down the track, and the security people came over and said, "You okay?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Remember, stuff that goes through you hurts you more than the stuff that goes over you." And I said, kept that in mind. In Australia one time we were down there and they had a monsoon. The rains came this way for one day, and the next day they were coming this way, and they still started the race. And two cars got together over there, and they both went over my head. So you learn to duck.
Could you describe maybe an interesting race that you remember?
All of them were the same. It's an unusual life. I come home Friday night or Monday morning, fly in, change clothes, cut the grass, get my clothes, and fly out on Wednesday night again someplace.
What were the years that you worked for the Indy cars? Was it before or after the Bucks, or same time?
Oh, no, it's same time.
Same time?
I had a full-time job at the county, and I did this fill-in. I started, well, as I said, State Fair Park, I probably was in the early 60s and worked through 90s, something like that. And on the trail with IndyCar, I think I started in early 80s and up to year 2000, I think. But then they became political, so.
Was it more exciting to watch Indy cars?
Oh, yeah.
Rather than basketball?
Yes.
Yes.
Ask my wife. She's a Packer fan. I stay out of the house because she screams. I was thinking of getting her a phone line to McCarty up there in Green Bay, but she is really an avid. She's got a certificate. She's a member of the. I got one too, but I mean, yeah, Indy cars. I don't miss a race.
Talking about football, are you a big football fan yourself, or more take it or
I just find when I watch them, they lose. So she says best I don't watch them. So I go to the computer room and stay in there, or go outside in the garage or in the basement. Or.
Did you ever feel overwhelmed with all the work you had to do between IndyCar racing and the Bucks?
No.
Or no? Did you always enjoy your job?
Oh yeah, yeah. I can't say enough of the life I led. Of course, I'm only 49 now, so.
Can you talk about more of the routine, your routine that you go through each day when you score for the Bucks? Can you take us through a
Yeah,
normal day?
as I told him, it takes usually by the time I leave here and come back, it's over 5 hours. Because I have to be down there at least an hour and a half before, because the NBA requires us to have the starters up on the scoreboard and have the scoreboard in operation. And an hour and a half before the game, I have to see the coaches to make sure we get to verify that starting lineup. I take that, we make copies of that, and pass it out to all the people involved. 1 hour before the game, I have to get the active, inactive list from each team. Make copies of that, pass that around to everybody. That has to be also sent to New York. And 20 minutes before the game, 15 to 20 minutes before the game, I see the coaches again to verify their starting lineups and let them know who the officials are and so forth. And when the clock comes down, I sit down and start scoring and timing. We have to record who got the tip, what the time was, all that sort of stuff, and then we get going, and then it's all locked in from there on in. I have a screen in front of me which I check at the end of every quarter. I get a copy of a score sheet. I have to compare it to the book that the computer didn't screw up again. And we make copies of that, and the guys pass that out. I stay at the table. Do the second quarter, halftime, I double check again. End of the third quarter, I double check. End of the game, we triple check it to make sure we get all the numbers right. Then we make copies of that, and they compile them in the media room, and we make sets that go out, get mailed out that night. And the computer people push down that we've checked it all, and then they send it out to the world. Then I finally get in my car and come back. And if it's a 7 o'clock game, I leave here about 4, and I get back probably close to 10.
Do you feel as though technology has made your job easier in any way?
No,
Reporting, no?
no. It makes it more confining because electronics to this day can't be trusted. And even the people who are doing the computer work, and I don't blame them, but they're talking to one another. But the noise from the people with them confuses things once in a while. Because I was talking to one of the guys the other night on the phone, and he said, well, he called the number 22, but the computer operator picked it up as 24. And that right away put an error in there. So, but to go back to that spot and correct that error takes about 5 minutes. And so in order to make sure that that cooperation doesn't get screwed up, you got to be real careful as to what you're doing. And because it's that involved, I think people are expecting it to be instantaneous, but it can't be. It just does. In real life, that won't work. And we used to have it where all the people who were working were all at the same table, so we could just holler down, and if it was something wrong, they could erase it or white out it and correct it then and there. Now they got to go through all the gymnastics to make sure it's corrected.
Do you remember any refs that you worked with that were particularly tough to work with at all? Or
No, I mean, well, see, they used to only have 2 officials, and you got to know them pretty well. Now they got 3, and they rotate them so that one official will never work 2 games in a row for the same team, and he'll never work in the same city as 2 games in a row, and that kind of mixes them up quite a bit.
So we'd like to move a little bit more into the early 2000s with the Bucks being a little bit more successful with players like Ray Allen and Michael Redd. Can you tell us how tough it was to lose that series in 2001, especially being at home to Allen Iverson and the 76ers? Was it particularly a heartbreaker to lose that game?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we thought it was a tough game to start with, and those kind you kind of sit in the back of your head that, gee whiz, we should have won that game, and we didn't.
Did you feel as though the Bucks were a better team than the 76ers then?
On that day, yeah, I think so. Yeah, they played well enough to win it. Let's put it that way. Like Wisconsin did yesterday.
Who do you think was the most exciting player to watch?
Oscar Robertson.
No, for the early 2000s.
Oh. That one avoids me. No, don't know.
Don't know. Did you enjoy watching Ray Allen specifically?
Oh yes,
A little bit more
yeah,
than
oh yeah.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Gentleman and scholar.
Who was a person in those early 2000s? Did you develop any strong relationships with any of those players, or?
John McLaughlin, yeah.
Of the early 2000s, more.
Oh, yeah, no.
So you mentioned you had a very good relationship with John McLaughlin. Can you tell us your first interaction that you had with John? Was it a friendly one or memorable one at all?
Not really. I mean, it was a normal thing that, like you treat your neighbors, and treated him the same way, and other guys that came over, I mean, it was normal.
Did you invite guys over to your house often, or?
No, I mean, it just sporadically. I had 4 children and a couple pets, and the expansion we didn't do until the house was built in 59, and one night 4 kids were laying on the ground, and my daughter had a rabbit a rabbit came floating through, and a dog chased the rabbit, and I said, we got to get an expansion, so I put addition onto the house, and that solved things quite a bit. 3 boys stayed in one room, they were in bunk beds, and my daughter stayed in her room, and we opened up that back bedroom into the family room so that they could invite friends over and take part in there. We had a pull-out bed there too, so that's the way we lived. Made it through.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the family life that you had? Are you close with your sons and daughters still today? Or?
Well, my oldest son was more involved with working with his hands and his mind, and I said I wish I had half of his knowledge that he did. Because one night I asked him, I said, geez, we could use gutters. About a month later I came home from work and there were new gutters up, and I was walking into the house and I thought, what's that out in back? The old gutters. He says, I said, Troy, that's really nice of you. I said, but what about those old gutters? He said, you told me to put the new ones up. He said, you didn't say nothing about old ones. So I had to talk to the other 2 boys and haul them to the dump. And my daughter wanted to go into gymnastics, and because my second oldest son was in judo for a number of years, when he was 12 years old, he and I were walking out of a judo meet. He looked up and he said, I don't want to be in judo anymore. And I said, why not? He said, I don't want to hurt anybody anymore. I said, oh, okay. But you got to figure out a way to get to college because we don't have the money. So he took up gymnastics, and he got a 4-year scholarship to Wisconsin, and that really put him on the way. He ended up going to Baltimore, working in gymnastics, and he got into finance, and he lives in Boston, near Boston now, and has 5 children. 2 of them graduated in schools in Pennsylvania, colleges. The oldest son went out to Denver, and he's a solar energy man, and he raises chickens and fish because he wants to be self-sufficient. And the youngest one is a teacher at Waukesha Tech. He lives on the northeast side of Milwaukee, and my daughter lives in Muskego. So they're still around, and the house is big enough to have them all over here, so it's nice that they're spread out.
Yeah. So going back to your relationship with John, how did it develop after you guys started becoming better friends? Maybe after.
Well, he stayed with the Bucks too. I mean, he's in an unofficial capacity. He's not getting paid, but he works there for TV. And so, I mean, we just continued it, that's all. Mainly we see one another down at the Raleigh Center and go from there.
Do you guys hang out frequently?
No. He's cut back on his schedule because he doesn't want to fly more. He doesn't want to go around the United States. He wants to stay here in town. So it's kind of, ebbing away, but I don't know how long he's going to stay. I don't know how long I'm going to stay. Somebody asked me for a goal, and I said, well, it's always good to have one. Eddie Gottlieb, who was the scorer for the Philadelphia 76ers, worked until he was 90. And actually was with the club until he was 93 when he died. And so I thought, well, that 90 sounds like a pretty good idea. So I got a few years to go yet. So
you're hoping to maybe make it to 90?
I would hope to. You never know.
Never know, but hopefully. So you mentioned earlier that you when you worked in government, you worked with the park system. How was working with that? Did you feel as though you're making the Milwaukee County a little bit better? Better place to live? Or?
I guess you have to understand that when you change ownerships, it's a major overhaul. And you never know who they have connections with that they want to do the work that you're doing. So it becomes political. So you have to keep doing what you're doing and work with the new people as best you can. But that never says that tomorrow they could say, we want somebody else. It wasn't that way when we started, because we were all groping and we were all trying to figure out what to do next to make it better. And in fact, when I first started working for him, I joined 2 other doctors, and we bought a season ticket together so we could take our kids and our family down there, and we'd each have a selection of like 12 or 15 ball games a year, And that worked out pretty well for about 10 years. Now my kids said, we're getting tired of going down there. We don't want to go down there. So, okay, so we gave it up. But I mean, this day and age, I don't think I could afford a season ticket.
Oh, they're pretty expensive. How was the transition that you guys made from the Mecca to the Bradley Center?
Well, it was pretty smooth. The only problem is that, again, they don't ask the people who are working what kind of conditions they want. And to this day, I stumble over to get to the scoring stand. It's very narrow back there, and they're going to have the same thing, I'm sure, at the new arena, because nobody asks anybody how much room do you need, or what you like, what you do at your position, how much space at the table do you need, and that becomes a hazard. But I don't know. The Bradley Center has got more space, and it was easier to work with. The arena, the locker rooms were smaller, and the layout was a little more. The interior was great, but the exterior wasn't that great. What happened at the Bradley Center was they built it on a land that sifted, and they had a lot of breakage and a lot of problems. People never even saw them because they corrected them before they got too far out of line. But a lot of times there were broken pipes and electrical connections gone and so forth. So that's what happened at the Bradley Center.
Right. Were you lucky enough to receive a ring for that 71 season? No, you weren't.
Well, in those days, they didn't provide rings.
No.
IndyCar did.
Oh.
I've got a, whatever they call it, a wine thing, no, a champagne thing, deer thing. I could show you later. That's the only thing I got from the championship year.
So you referenced that ring that you're wearing right now. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that is? Or?
That was given to me for 10 years with IndyCar racing.
Oh, really? That's pretty cool. So how difficult was it for you to balance, life with your family, your 3 kids, and then also your? It
was tough. It's still tough. I have to have a good wife to keep up with me. I mean, you think it's easy, and you look at the schedule and say, okay, but you don't realize that Friday night I had a herd game. Saturday night we had a herd game. The team from Oshkosh was here. Sunday I had a Marquette women's game at 3 o'clock, and then Monday I had a Bucks game at 7. And that's 4 in a row. And the week before I had 5 in a row. So I mean, eating and getting places and doing things that you normally would do just take a real hammer once in a while. Especially at Christmas time with the games up at Concordia.
Mm-hmm. So you referenced you do college games for Marquette. Do you like to do college games more than NBA games? Is it a different atmosphere?
It's different atmosphere. It's different scoring because the men do it by halves and the women do it by quarters, and the rules are a little bit different. But the Al Center at Marquette is a very nice venue. It only holds 4,000, but it's a well-developed basketball court. And men play at the Bradley Center, so I mean, no change there. And it's a different game, so yes, we enjoy that.
Do you think college is more exciting to watch rather than the NBA? Or
I don't get too excited either way. You can't. I mean, if I were to ebb and flow like the game goes, it wouldn't be worth it because you'd miss too much. I'm more concentrating on making sure that basket by number 21 gets number 21 in the book. And that rebound by so-and-so gets that one. I mean, those are the kind of things that you can't look around too much. That's why I say I can do before, I can do after, but I can't do during.
Right. Was there anyone that you ever dealt with on the Bucks that was not very fun to deal with? Someone who wasn't very nice?
No. You try and retain the relationship the best you can. And if you find somebody that you're not just coordinating with, you just kind of walk away.
Right.
And then someone will surprise you. I mean, somebody may not say, yes, I'll boot you one day, and one day you're walking down a hallway or something, and they put an arm around you or something like that. One night up in Madison a couple of years ago, John Henson came over and put his arm around me, and I didn't even know he knew me. And he started talking, and I said, those are the kind of things that you never expect, but it's worthwhile.
So the Bucks players that are playing today, do you feel as though they're different? They have a different mindset, different lifestyle than the guys who played back in the 70s?
No, I think a lot of the players are pretty much similar. Some players are more cordial to you, let's put it that way. Some players before the game come down and bump fists for you, and you know that happens right from the season begins. And other times they'll just stop and talk to you, and you just never realize how close you are to them. But yet they see you every night, and I see them because I go to the locker room and see the coaches and stuff, but the other guys that work for me don't know half of them.
Yeah.
It's a tough life. I mean, it's very, because they have to put out when the game is on, they have to push for practice, and they have an uneven schedule where they're going to a plane, coming off a plane. The Bucks are gone for 2 weeks now. I mean, that's not an easy life.
What was the most difficult part of balancing the different aspects of your life, would you say?
Time. Time to do things that you normally would do at home when you're not around. And timing of when you eat and when you don't eat, that type of thing. Some games you eat before you go down, some games you don't eat until you get down there, and some games you just, depends what happens, and you may not eat at all.
So you referenced that you were able to travel with IndyCar. Did you ever travel with the Bucks at all?
Yeah, any game that they organized, they were responsible for, we would go to. Normally those would be games preseason. One of the ones that I remember most was preseason when Kareem joined us. We were going to St. Louis, and we got to the airport. We looked out, and there was a plane, but there was a whole big puddle of oil sitting there. We thought, oh boy, here we go. So they got a plane in from Fond du Lac, and it was a smaller plane. Seats are only on both, single-lane seats on both sides. We're flying down to St. Louis, and when you go over the Mississippi River, we're only at 5,000 feet or something like that. The currents change when you go over Mississippi River. So we bounced, and Greg Smith was sitting behind Kareem, and he shook Kareem. He says, Kareem, we're about to crash. I thought you want to see it. And Kareem just went wild. And while we were down there, I was assigned to go over to the arena and set it up for the crew. And in those days, the 24-second clocks were portable. They used to sit on the floor behind each basket. So I was unpacking them, and a guy came over and said, what are you going to do with those? And I said, I'll put them over there. I'll put one over. He said, no, you're not. I said, why not? He said, this is a union place. I said, so? He said, we got to do that. I said, so what do I got to do? He said, you got to tell me where it goes. So I had to walk down there and point where he put it down, show him where the wire would go, put it back. We got that all squared away. I got where everybody sat, and we got all our people designated. And I'm walking back to the hotel. Also, I look up, and there's Guy Rogers waving at me. He said, Bob, what's Guy Rogers want, right? Go up there, there's 5 guys, 5 ball players. We understand Sheepshead's a big game in Milwaukee. Can you teach us how to play Sheepshead? So for the next 2 hours, I taught those 5 guys how to play Sheepshead. I didn't even get a chance to get to the room. I went to the room, washed up, and went back to the game. It was just one of those memorable things that you just never forget. But yeah, we flew, like I said, I went to North Dakota that one night, Green Bay. Wherever we go, the worst trip we make is lacrosse, because we leave here about 1 in the afternoon or noon, get out there, make the game. By the time we get back, it's like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. That's a long ride.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've been all over. Wherever the Bucks organize the game, even in North Dakota, that's where we go.
Where was the best place that you traveled with the Bucks? You referenced with IndyCar, it was Australia, but then with the Bucks, do you have a place?
No. I mean, the Bucks, most of it was within the United, confines, and most of it was by bus. That first year when we were organizing, we would drive our own cars to the places because we couldn't. The players would leave in the morning, and we had jobs to do, and we had to go. We'd leave at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon and drive to where we were going. Most unusual game we did was in Fond du Lac. It was in an auditorium, and they had the basketball court laid out. There was no way to sit on the side of the basketball court. We had to sit at the end zone of the basketball. You ever score a game that's so weird that you're looking at a team way over on the other end? We worked it. Had no choice.
Yeah. So now moving into more of the modern era of the Bucks. In 2013, a lot of people were very wary on the Bucks picking Giannis in the draft. Did you have an initial reaction when you heard that they picked a little known name out of Greece, or?
No, I mean, every year is different, and you got to approach it that way. You just sorry to see some of the better players leave. But I think a lot of that sometimes is done because of the fact that the monetary value is there, and they're balancing their books. They're trying to make a buck, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. One of the nicest owners was Herb Cole, Senator Cole. He was always very friendly. In fact, he was at the last game, stopped over and wished us all a happy Thanksgiving. And he, on my 80th birthday, he gave me a birthday cake.
Do you have a good relationship? Did you have a good relationship with the senator? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's very nice, yes. He always called me Bob, and I called him Senator, and very nice gentleman.
Do you have a good relationship with the new owners?
No.
No.
I'd rather not go into it.
All right. So.
Keep in mind, they're from New York.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people from New York.
Yeah. So, do you like the direction that the Bucks are taking right now?
Yes.
With the future. And
Jason Kidd's a super coach.
He is.
And he's got some good assistant coaches.
Do you feel as though Jason Kidd is the best coach they've had?
Well, that's a tough one. Larry Costello was a very good coach. Don Nelson was a very good coach. Even though he scheduled a game up in Wisconsin Rapids or something, we hit the floor, it was 103 degrees. It was a farm game of some sort. And we wish he never got scheduled. That was in August or something like that. I say, oh, he was a nice coach too. I mean, most of their coaches have been very nice. Scott Skiles, 50-50. You can go to the list, but most of them were very nice. And Jason is super.
Would you say that you've developed a relationship with Jason better than Larry Costello? Or?
No, they're all the better ones. I've always gotten along with very well, and they've gotten along with me. I mean, I see them 3 times every night, but I mean, the world is different backstage than it is on stage. Phil Jackson came in with Los Angeles one time, and I went in for the lineup, and he said, "You got a minute?" I said, "Sure." He said, "We haven't talked for a while." I said, "No, we haven't seen you for about a half a year." He said, "Yeah, let's go for a walk." So we start going to the locker room, and all of a sudden the PR guy comes up and he says, Phil, we got to go talk to the press. He said, "Wait a minute, I'm with my buddy Bob. We're going for a walk." Walked all the way around the Bradley Center, came back and had a long talk. I never knew he was that close to me, and it was just something unusual. But those things develop, and most of the coaches are very nice off court. And that's a great. It makes you feel good that you've helped them, or they've helped you, or someone kid a little bit about it, and it makes the evening worthwhile.
Do you enjoy watching the modern day Bucks more than you did maybe back in the?
No, 70s? It's in the area that it's at. I don't really watch them on TV that much because I know what they can do. I'll maybe turn in to see what they're doing, and if they're doing well, I may stay with them. But no, it's pretty uniform over the years as to what they can do.
Do you think the 3-point line has made the game a lot different than it was back then, or?
Not that much. I think right now the Bucks got a team that has to run, and if they got a set of plays, they don't play as well. But they got a group of people who can run and do run, but then when they slow down, they have a problem scoring points. So each year is a different type of a team. I mean, Tom Maker might be a real good ball player 3-4 years from now, but right now he's struggling. So maybe after a while they'll start setting plays better, and they'll incorporate him. But right now he's kind of on the outside looking in.
So how long would you say that you had the same crew over the years? Was there?
Well, I've got a crew of, well, first of all, I've got a crew of 8 that works with me, with the computers and the timers and the scoreboard operators and that. And then we've got substitutes that come in and go because people have things to do. The average is between the 8-10 guys is 38 years, which is highly unusual. But that just shows what camaraderie we've had over the years. Some of them worked for 4 or 5 years, raised their family for another 5-10 years, and came back. But by keeping track of how many years they worked, from what years, the average is about 38 years, which is kind of long when you figure out you got a group like that. So they've gone through all sorts of ups and downs and different computer systems, different computers, and it takes a lot of planning on everybody's part, and that's sometimes hard to understand. But same thing with the high school timing thing. We've got people been there for many, many years. That what's happening is the younger generation, for some reason or other, and I said, I just can't understand, probably for the last 10 years, we bring them in, they work 1 or 2 ball games, and then they won't show up. And nobody's there to take their place. So we stick around because we know each other and we know that we can rely on everybody, and they can make a commitment and they come in and they stay. And I mean, sure, it's not that much money, but it's something that has to be done. And we don't know what's going to happen when we start backing out. And even our families can't understand that, and that's tough to explain. Nobody takes responsibility anymore, and we don't know why. And they say, oh, I had something else to do. We said, well, tell somebody so we can get somebody to take her place. Well, I didn't feel good that night or something like that. You know, that you can't do. Make a commitment, do your best, don't worry about it.
Do you think the game has changed a lot over the years?
The game's faster.
Game's faster.
Yeah.
Do you think it's better if it's a little bit faster, or?
No, I think they played to their abilities, and they played to the rules of the game and how it worked. Definitely faster, though, and people want to see that. They want to see more points, and so that's what they're playing to.
So you referenced earlier that the most exciting player that you got to see was probably Oscar Robinson.
Overall, yes. I mean, the whole game, not just shooting or scoring or defense or that, but of all phases of the game, Oscar is probably the best player I've ever seen.
Do you think what made him separate than people like Michael Jordan?
I think he was one of the few players that watched film. I think he's one of the players who paid attention, and I think he was one of the players who watched the game completely. I saw him one time put his hand on somebody's hip and actually move him. And he would study film and know that if somebody's coming up, dribbling the ball, and he calls a play, and this guy zigzags around and so forth and so on, Oscar would meet him before he caught the ball on the other side of the court, because Oscar knew where he was going to go. But he didn't follow him. He just went the other way. And he got the younger players to play the way they should. He threatened them.
So would you say he was the most passionate about the sport?
Yes.
More than anyone else that you dealt with? So with the modern day Bucks, did you feel as though picking Giannis was the correct? Giannis Antetokounmpo was the correct decision back.
He again is very dedicated. He does a lot of outside work. He works off hours, and he loves the game.
Do you have a good relationship with him at all?
Pretty fair. Not as close as I did with John McLaughlin or some of the others, but we're getting there.
Do you feel as though that he's a leader of the team? Leads the team like Oscar kind of did?
Yeah, I think he does. He doesn't have all the attributes of Oscar. He hasn't played defense as tough as Oscar did. But he's got his own way of doing things, and it seems to work very well.
How do you think Oscar, you said that he threatened some players, jokingly threatened some players to maybe work a little bit harder. Do you know how he encouraged them to be more serious about the game?
He'd take them aside and work with them individually. He threatened to kick them, and you know where, and they listened to him. Bobby Dandridge didn't want to ever. In fact, Bobby Dandridge never went to Green Bay. We always had a preseason game because he didn't like the bus ride. And Oscar said, "Okay, that's fine, but you stay here in town and watch movies or something like that." And he was one of them that was threatened by Oscar.
Did those players ever feel as though it was unfair for Oscar to?
No, I don't think so. No, they understood where he came from.
Do you think there's any player today that draws parallels to Oscar in any way?
I don't think so. Well,
One of a kind player, would you say?
Zaza Gabor was one of those that was tough also in the locker room. I don't know how tough he was, but I know he was. I was sorry to see him go because he was tough in the locker room. And sometimes it's better to have one or two guys tough in the locker room so the other guys shape up.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to, but I work out 3 times a week at Athletic Center too. But I do that. I do that so I can keep my blood circulating.
Do you work out with any of the players at all?
No,
No. They usually.
no, I'm out here, Wisconsin Athletic Club.
What would you say would be the most difficult part of your job?
Allocating the time, especially where different. I mean, next week, Tuesday or Wednesday, we had 11:30 game at Marquette, women's game. Everybody says, "Why 11:30?" Well, once a year, they bring in all the school kids for a game, and it's 11:30 in the morning, and the next game may be 7 o'clock at night. The next game may be 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's keeping track and allocation of time is probably the most difficult thing, and keeping peace with your family.
Yeah. So the Mecca was known for, they had a floor that was, known nationally for being very, different, very original. Were you very impressed by it at all, or? Did you feel as though, you didn't really understand the excitement about all of it?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So going back to your childhood a little bit, could you tell us a little bit more about how you grew up in a time where Greendale, it was developing as a government sponsored neighborhood. Did you feel as though moving here was the correct decision when you did?
Well, what happened when I first got married in '56? Went to a church, south side of Milwaukee. They had a softball team, and I was in charge of the softball team. And we practiced on Monday. I said, anybody who practice can play in the game on Thursday. So we kept that up. We took 3 years. We took the championship out here in Greendale. So I got familiar with Greendale, and that's why we saw this place, this land, and we built the house in '59. And from that point on, it just kind of settled down, and I played softball for another 4 or 5 years, and then we figured we won a championship, so why keep going? But basketball was always in the background.
Were you ever involved in any military service at all?
I went down to be examined, and I was declared 4F, and my mother didn't like that. So she made me go down to the office and ask them why I was 4F. I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to encourage them to change it. And they said I was 4F because of my eyesight.
What does 4F mean?
You weren't eligible to be drafted.
So do you feel kind of blessed in a way that you were?
Yeah, probably. I wasn't too thrilled about being in the draft, and you never know what you're going to get through that. And even when I was dropped from college at UWM, I worked 1 month at a weld shop, I worked 1 month at Perfects, I worked the rest a few months at Alice Chalmers, and I always had a place to work, and important to me because I could save that money to go to school again. And at Christmas time, I worked at the main post office, probably from December 15th through the first of the year because I knew the manager of the division down at downtown. So it was like 12 hours a day for about 10 days, and that paid my way through Wisconsin. In fact, my father worked at a grocery store when he was, drugstore when he was younger. So I had a paper route when I was younger, and when I went into high school, he made me get rid of the paper route because he never enjoyed high school, and he said he wanted me to enjoy high school. So when I got into college, he gave me $10 a week to pay for my tuition. As long as I was in school, he paid it. It was $90 a year, so that wasn't very much. And that paid my college tuition. And at UWM, of course, it just took a bus down from 45th in Oklahoma. And so that's why you kind of pick and choose as you're going along. Sometimes you're going to make good choices, sometimes you're going to make bad choices, but you got to push yourself a little bit.
Were you close with your family? Do you know your father and your mother? Your brother?
Well, my mother was the one that had the big stick that used to beat us on the hands when we were bad. My dad was not quite that tough, but if he told you to cut the grass, you knew you should cut the grass. And that way, I guess in the long term, if I looked at it, I would say I wasn't really that close. I mean, we we got along, everything like that, but we're not buddies.
Were you close with your brother at all?
No.
No.
We were 4 years apart, and my involvement with other things were different than his. Unfortunately, he went into service, and he got involved with Agent Orange, and he died when he was 56, so that was a tough part.
So, in your childhood, did you do any other activities besides, more in high school, did you do any other activities besides being in the sports?
I used to, just on the playground, soccer or softball or something like that, but I never really was an avid athlete. I never encouraged, I never wanted to go out for football, I never wanted to do that type of stuff, but soccer wasn't too bad and softball wasn't too bad, but never anything else, no.
So you referenced that your brother ended up dying of Agent Orange, unfortunately. Do you feel as though that, in a way, that you were fortunate not to have, gone to the war then?
Yes.
It's similar to him.
Overall, yes. Yeah.
Do you feel as though that set the path up for you to
probably
become scorekeeper and things like that?
And when I first started doing the scoring and timing for basketball, I just thought it's not bad, and you got more involved as a attendant for basketballs and stuff like that. So you did more things. I used to work out with the team, even though I didn't play with the team. I used to work out with them, and so I was involved with basketball. We had good coaches too in those days, and always in the back of my mind was basketball.
So growing up in Milwaukee, in the area, did it ever feel segregated to you? With the different ethnicities throughout the area?
No. I figure I got treated the next guy like I'd be treated, and always felt that way. I had many Afro-American friends. Sam Williams, he's all smiles, big hug every time I see him down at the Bradley Center. Others the same way. It's most of the security people down at the Bradley Center. How are you and all that. It's the way it's got to be.
Yeah. You also experienced a time in the 60s where civil rights was a very prominent thing in Milwaukee. They had a lot of marches and anything like that. Did you ever participate in anything like that?
No, I never got. I tried to avoid, even though I work for the county, I've tried to avoid politics at all costs. And I was very close with John Doyne, who was the county executive. And in fact, when he left, a lot of people donated money to him. And he called me up one day and he says, meet me in the parking lot. I said, okay. He wanted me to help him decide where to distribute all this money that people gave him. So I helped him do that. But involved in the voting and all that sort of stuff, no, that was not for me.
So through the years, you obviously focused a lot on sports. Do you ever have any regrets that you didn't do anything?
Probably that I didn't get into auto racing sooner. But no, I guess I should be blessed with the fact that I'm in basketball as long as I was, and or as long as I have been. Do I want to cut back? I mean, last year we had the NCAAs here. We had the big women's Big East tournament here. We won't have that this year. So, I mean, I'm cutting back a little bit. But I don't know. I'll see. See how the body holds up. That's the key to it.
With this new arena they're building downtown, do you have any strong opinions on it? Do you feel as though they're ready for a new arena, or?
No, I haven't been in it, and haven't seen any drawings or anything like that. In fact, when they made that movie of me here a couple months ago, one of them suggested, or one of my friends suggested, that they would have me locking up the doors for the Bradley Center and opening up the doors for the new one. I said, that may never come to be, but that's okay. And then my one son suggested that they could implode the old arena while I'm standing there. I said, I don't think I'll have that either. But all that stuff comes up. And
do you feel like the basketball as a business has just become more about money and, making as much money as possible, or?
I think I got more things done with and for me by being involved in basketball, yes. I think that's definitely a plus.
Were you ever offered another job, maybe by another team, or
No.
another opportunity to go anywhere else?
At one time I was a statistician for a semi-pro football team, West Dallas Racers. And that was interesting because they was all looking for money, and one year we were playing for the championship and the players weren't going to play because they weren't paid. So I had 22 football players sitting in the same area that you're sitting in and discussing what to do. They decided that I should get the money and then I would give it to them rather than go through ownership. So we did that, but that was an interesting evening.
Was there ever a time that you kind of felt tempted to maybe go in for another job, maybe with another team, or?
No.
You discussed how you ended up stopping with IndyCar. Was there any reason for that?
I'm sorry?
You ended up stopping doing your job for the IndyCar racing.
They
was there a reason for that?
they suggested I not come back. Kind of.
Do you know why that is?
Politics.
Do you kind of feel a little cheated that you were, asked to leave, or did you kind of feel like the time was right?
Well, it's on an annual basis. They recruit people, and they just didn't recruit me one year.
So through the years, the NBA has had some lockouts where the
Well,
players have decided.
every year, our staff has to take a test, and it's graded. And if you don't grade right, then they don't approve you. So that you have to study up. You have to know the rule book. You have to know what your job is, and if you don't perform up to their standards, you're asked to have them leave. I know there was a fellow caught me one night coming out of that after that film showing, and he worked for me for 5 years, and he said he's really sorry to leave, and he went up to Fond du Lac, and he's working for some film company up there. And I mean, that's the way it happens. People find different things to do and follow up.
So through the years, the NBA has had the players have decided, not to play through disputes, through everything, and there's been some lockouts. What did you do with your free time during that time? And did you agree with,
Just anything we could. I filled in for some guys who needed help on different things. Yeah, that's all you can do. Yeah.
Did you ever feel that the players were unjust in what they were demanding?
I try not to get into that area. I got troubles of my own.
Yeah. So did you ever feel as though there was a time where you felt as though the Bucks might let you go, might find someone new for you?
Somebody asked me that about 5 years ago when the new owners took over, and I said, well, over here is the top. I figured they start working from the top down. So I said, I got about 5 years before I see whether they want me to keep me or not. So, And to some extreme, a lot of those people did leave already, so you never know. Fortunately, I'm on good terms with Peter Fajan, the president. That helps.
Of course, of course.
In fact, he stopped me the other night and he said, "Tell me what about the games with Oshkosh?" We had the herd down here for 2 games, and nobody had to, he wanted to know my feelings as to how it went and what was involved and all that sort of stuff. So that felt pretty good.
How did it go?
Went pretty well. We were surprised that 4,000 people showed up, but they were all free, but they didn't spread the word, so what are you going to do? And the next night was unusual because nobody was invited, and there were about 50 people there, something like that. So it went well. The players played well. Well, the second game was 132 to 125, and the one before there was 99 to 84 or something like that. And it was a different aspect. And they used 4 officials, which makes it even worse because there's a lot more fouls called.
Do you feel like the Bucks are going in the correct direction with making this new team for Oshkosh?
That's hard to say. I mean, it gives them an easy outlet to pick up players when they need somebody, and if somebody else gets hurt, so they can pop one in there real quick. And I think that might help. And the evaluation of people, bringing in people, have them try out at Oshkosh before they move them in to try out with them, and that may have a positive effect. Yeah.
Did you score the game this year that they had at the Mecca? Yeah.
Yeah.
The Bucks playing the. What was the atmosphere like to be back in the, in the old stadium?
It wasn't as positive as I thought.
How
It
so?
was, well, the layout was very different. The Bucks locker room was eliminated and moved to a different spot. I had to walk more. The entranceways were not the same as they used to be. One thing I thought was positive was the locker room where we did all those statistics at the end of the game. My locker room was still there. that was really positive. The negatives probably were because we parked our cars in the same place but had to walk farther to get to the place. And it was colder than we thought it was inside before. And it was more crowded. In other words, the whole game I had people's knees in my back. And that's no fun because you can't get up, you can't stretch, you can't, I mean, it's just made it awkward. The volume was high and the people seemed to enjoy it. I wouldn't want to play many games there, but I guess they've improved it for hockey and so forth, so they're plus. And I guess the second thing is that the layout was so much different than it is at the Bradley Center for the media room, for where you had someone to pick up a soda or something like that, and the layout just didn't lend itself to the old days, but it was different.
Did you enjoy going back at all, or was it just more of a...
Based 50-50. I mean, I could have done without it.
Yeah.
Even parking the cars, I pulled up. They said we were going to park on 6th and State. And I pulled into that open lot, and all of a sudden the parking attendant came over and said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "They said 6th and State." He said, "Well, that's across the street." I said, "That's where the auditorium is." He said, "Yeah, but your car's going to be parked over there." So I said, "Okay." That's what I worry about most is parking. And our guys are now parking in the new parking structure on the north side of the old new arena. I still park. I pull in and I get attendants take my car and move it over between the parking structure and the Bradley Center. That's important because it's nice to get out. Car's all warmed up. But
We'd like to thank you for your time.
okay,
Thanks very much.
no charge.